Old Reece, a local hairdresser from Idlewood who closely resembles Morgan Freeman, the legend of American and world cinema. Even though Old Reece does not play any significant role in the game's story, he is still a beloved character among the gaming community. A character who arouses sympathy in a very simple way. He is simply a charming older gentleman with a good vibe. He's a good old man who's nice to stop by for a new haircut whenever you're in the area. Over the years, many different conspiracy theories have arisen around Old Reece. The most popular of which is that the man is allegedly CJ's father. This is a theory that makes a lot of sense for many reasons. It's a theory that makes you blush, especially considering how mysterious CJ's father is. Unfortunately, it is also a theory that has many logical arguments that, according to some players, effectively destroy the entire idea that Old Reece is CJ's father. Is that how it is? We'll try to find the answer to this question today. Since the topic is quite controversial, I will be happy to read your points of view on the matter. So after the episode, remember that the comments section belongs to you. So who is Mr. Old Reece to CJ? Let's start with the least exciting answer, which has its crowd of supporters. Namely, that Old Reece is an ordinary hairdresser, of which there are many in Los Santos. From an outside perspective, it might seem that this theory does not quite fit the whole puzzle. It's important to underline that Old Reece's very words indicate that the old man knows CJ better than the average hairdresser knows his average customer. When CJ comes to Old Reece, the old man almost every time brings up some interesting topics, one of them being regarding CJ's parents. Old Reece has quite a lot of dialogue referring to Beverly Johnson. Some of them sound as if the man saw CJ's mother quite often, knew what she liked and disliked, and generally knew quite a lot about her. Just listen for yourself.
I think Beverly would have approved. Your mom's is rolling in her grave. Your moms used to choose your styles. Your moms would be proud.
Of course, this can be explained quite easily, because considering that some time ago, Idlewood belonged to the families, many people who lived in the Ganton area certainly went to Old Reece to benefit from his hairdressing skills. If the district was safe for the members and families from Grove Street because it was in the hands of this gang, then CJ's mom probably visited Old Reece as well. Additionally, considering that Old Reece had been a barber in the area for many years, he could have developed a more friendly relationship with the Johnson family while doing his services. It is very possible that the old man also lived in that area, which made it even more likely that, from time to time, members of the Johnson family simply crossed paths with Old Reece. Going further, perhaps one of the most interesting things from the point of view of San Andreas fans is that the man knows CJ's father, who, as previously mentioned, is still a big mystery to players.
Your dad used to get a cut just like that.
As you heard, Old Reece claims that CJ's father also liked to have the same hairstyle as his son. What's sad and funny at the same time is that it's hard to determine which hairstyle he's talking about, because this line of dialogue is played randomly, no matter which hairstyle will be chosen. What is worth adding to this is that this line of dialogue eliminates the possibility that Old Reece is CJ's father. However, you can find theories on the internet that do not exclude this possibility. In turn, the old man's statement is justified by the fact that CJ's biological father was Old Reece, but CJ's mother divorced him. As a result, Beverly Johnson's new husband became the head of the family, while CJ didn't know who his biological father was. Although this theory makes sense, it must be admitted that it seems to be highly exaggerated, and it's simply hard to think that the developers would have created such a confusing story, not even bringing up the fact that it's a side thread. Moving on, another interesting issue is the funeral of CJ's mother. There are lines of dialogue in the game where Old Reece pays respects to CJ and apologizes for not being at the funeral.
Sorry I missed the funeral, son.
This is an example of a great detail that shows that even those characters who do not have much in common with the main plot of the game, such as Old Reece, follows the course of events in the life of the protagonist to some extent. The creators even made sure that the player could not be able to hear these lines before the funeral. After all, barbershops are only unlocked in the ryder mission, which is a task that CJ can only start after the funeral. The next thing that should also be mentioned is this statement.
Told the cops I didn't know you.
Here, many people assume that Old Reece could be, for example, CJ's uncle, because Old Reece, not being close to CJ, Sweet, or the Johnson family in general, would not risk being punished for giving false testimony. Others, less inquisitive, believe that Old Reece, growing up in the local community in Los Santos, had strongly encoded street rules in his head, such as to never snitch. Hence the situation that when the police would raid his house, Old Reece not only wouldn't report on things that he potentially knew, but he also tipped off CJ to keep an eye on law enforcement officers because they were sniffing around a lot and asking about him. At the very end of this thread, it would be worth mentioning that Old Reece has a unique line of dialogue, which, by the way, is a reference to the beta version of the game.
Carl Johnson, you own the yay too?
Well, the old man asks CJ if he, like many members of rival gangs, started selling drugs. This short dialogue is related to a removed feature in GTA San Andreas, where initially we could buy and, as you can see, also sell drugs. By the way, one of the clues in this topic is a broken interaction with the drug dealer, who will be hostile to the player if he does not want to buy drugs. However, if the answer is positive, nothing will happen. And now, after everything we've discussed, it's hard not to feel that Old Reece was more to CJ's life than just a random hairdresser. The man knew the entire Johnson family quite well. You could even say that he was friends with this family to some extent, which is probably best demonstrated by Old Reece's statement that he was sorry that he didn't show up at CJ's mother's funeral. But is he telling the truth? We'll finish this thought in a moment. However, as has already been said before, it is also hard to believe in the theory that Old Reece is CJ's father. There's just not much evidence of it. This theory is very strange, if only because CJ never even acts as if Old Reece was his father. By the way, CJ even has to pay the regular price for the old man's available hairstyles. And then there's this line of dialogue about Old Reece knowing CJ's father.
Your dad used to get a cut just like that.
This statement certainly rules out the relationship of these two men in such a close line. This can't be a father-son relationship. In general, it's also difficult to suspect that Old Reece was any closer related to the Johnsons. Yes, it would seem that Old Reece knew quite a lot about CJ's family. He knew his father, he knew his mother. He defended CJ from law enforcement officers asking about him, and he felt bad that he missed a funeral that was very important to CJ. However, everything indicates that Old Reece was simply on very good terms with members of the Johnson family, rather than being a member of this family. Since we know that Old Reece liked to have good relations with his customers, the theory that fits best is that Old Reece was close to the local community. That's why he tried to look after it, and that's why he tried to have good relations with his clients. That's why Old Reece tried to actively participate in their lives. It is for this reason that sometimes, as players, we could get the impression that Old Reece somehow knew too much for being just an ordinary hairdresser. Even look at the following example. In one of the lines of dialogue, unfortunately not used in the final version, Old Reece mentions Emmett, saying that he's still dealing with weapons in the area.
Emmett's still pushing guns on young kids.
This situation perfectly shows that Old Reece simply lived on good terms with the people he cut. Thanks to his connections, he knew perfectly well what was going on in his backyard, in the area where he works, and in the area where he probably lives. Please let me know what you think about all this because it's a topic that has always been interesting to me. I also recommend you take a look at the episode that appeared recently. It's displayed on the left, and it's about the GTA moments where we wanted to do something different than the game tells us to do. In the meantime, take care and see you soon.